Good day, everyone. We are the Group 1, and now we will be discussing our discourse analysis about the Philippine Senate hearing on the drug war.
Sabi nyo rin po kanina, you take full legal responsibility for the consequences of the drug war.
Yes.
Kanina rin,
Yes.
kanina rin sabi nyo, maraming mali. No? So, halimbawa, si Kian de los Santos, menor de edad, hindi armado, nagmamakaawa, pero pinatay ng mga pulis sa drug war. Do you take responsibility for the death of Kian de los Santos?
The Criminal Act, hindi naman siguro.
The death. You take responsibility for his death.
Walang maniwala na abogado sa akin yan. That
Hindi
would
po,
be
sir.
a long shot.
Hindi po abogado. Nandito pa lang tayo
I
sa
was
Senado, hindi sa
referring
Korte.
to the policy na ginawa ko para sa mga pulis.
Yes,
Sabi
sir. At
ko,
nagbunga
for that,
yung
I
polisiya.
take full responsibility
Yes,
for
and
that.
what about yung bunga ng polisiya na libo-libong namatay kasama si Kian de los Santos? Do you also take full responsibility for that? Because in October 2020, na-quote po kayo na sinabi nyo, if there's killing there, I'm saying I'm the one. You can hold me responsible for anything, any death that has occurred in the execution of the drug war. Noong October ulit, October 21, noong 2021 naman, in a Reuters interview, kinwote kayo na sinabing, if there is any person who is going to prison, it would be me. I assume full responsibility. So, do you assume responsibility for the death of Kian de los Santos, Mr.
No.
Chair? No. How about
Ala-
si Carl
Alam mo,
Anthony
ma'am,
Nunez?
before you rumble on those many things,
No, I'm not rambling, Mr. Chair. Very specific yung mga tanong
the
ko.
specific ang law, guilt is personal. Tanong ka muna ng abogado.
Okay lang po. Kayang-kaya kong magtanong sa abogado. Sige,
tanong ka
itanong
muna
ko
ngayon
po.
before we proceed.
No.
Hindi tayo
I
magkakaintindihan
have prepared
dito.
these questions with my
Guilt
legislative
is
staff.
personal.
Yes, it's very personal.
Hindi
So,
mo pwedeng ipasa sa iba yan.
no. Hindi po ito pagpasa.
Ah,
Iniimbestiga
kaya nga.
po ng Blue Ribbon yung war on drugs at yung naging bunga na extrajudicial killings dyan. And I am basing my question dun sa mga sinabi ninyo repeatedly, parang tuwing Oktubre nga sinasabi nyo, na you will take responsibility.
Correct.
So now let me ask you about Carl Anthony Nunez, 20 years old. Walang nahanap na droga o baril sa katawan niya. Sabi nga ng investigador, mistaken identity. Do you take responsibility for his death?
You know, ma'am, can I ask for a recess of just a
It's
few
all right,
minutes?
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Hearing suspended.
Can the chair talk to the senator?
Can the resource person not point his finger at a member of the committee?
Contextual background. The contextual background of this analysis centers on the Philippine War on Drugs, a campaign spearheaded by former President Rodrigo Duterte during his administration from 2016 to 2022. This controversial policy aimed to eliminate drug-related crimes but faced widespread criticism for human rights violations, including numerous reports of extrajudicial killings. Many of these deaths were linked to law enforcement operations, often targeting low-income communities. So, the discourse takes place in the setting of a Senate hearing held on October 28, 2024, where public officials investigated the consequences of the drug war. The hearing was chaired by Senator Coco Pimentel and included critical questioning by Senator Risa Hontiveros. Hontiveros directly addressed Duterte's accountability for the deaths and the broader implications of his policies, highlighting high-profile cases like that of Kian de los Santos, a teenager killed during a police operation in 2017. So, this exchange reflects not only the political and legal strikes of Duterte's policies but also the ongoing debates about justice, human rights, and leadership responsibility in the Philippines. It is a moment where public discourse shifts toward questioning state-led violence and seeking accountability from those in power, contributing to a broader narrative of governance and advocacy for human rights. So, this analysis, a discourse analysis of the Philippine Senate hearing of the drug war.
Good day everyone. For this part of the presentation, I will be discussing the contextual information, particularly the type of discourse and the participants in our discourse analysis. So for the type of discourse analysis, the discourse we analyze falls under the legislative discourse genre, specifically in the setting of a Senate hearing. This Senate focuses on investigating accountability extrajudicial killings resulting from the Philippine government's war on drugs. Legislative discourse, as seen here, emphasizes structured arguments, questioning, and responses centered around policy making, accountability, and governance. For the participants, the key participants in this discourse are, first, we have the Senator Risa Hontiveros. She plays the role of the investigator, critically questioning former President Rodrigo Duterte about his accountability for the human rights violations during his administration's drug war. Her approach is assertive and persistent, emphasizing accountability. Second, we have former President Rodrigo Duterte, acting as a resource person in this Senate hearing. He responds to the allegations and his stance is defensive, often deflecting responsibility and interrupting the discourse. And third, we have Senator Coco Pimentel. Serving as the chairperson, his role is to maintain order throughout the hearing. He acts as a neutral party, ensuring that the process is followed.
So the setting and the purpose of the Senate hearing. The setting of the hearing is the Philippine Senate on October 28, 2024, where public officials are investigating the consequences of former President Rodrigo Duterte's war on drugs. So, the hearing was chaired by Senator Coco Pimentel, includes critical questioning from Senator Risa Hontiveros, who focuses on Duterte's accountability for human rights violations during the campaign, particularly the extrajudicial killings associated with it. So, the purpose of this hearing is to examine the outcome of Duterte's controversial drug war, hold public officials accountable for the violence that occurred, and address broader concerns about justice, human rights, and the role of state-led violence in the governance. So, high-profile cases such as the killing of teenager Kian de los Santos are used to emphasize the need for accountability and to question the policies that led to such tragic consequences.
This discourse structure describes a conversation marked by conflict and power imbalance. Let's break down each element, which is we have introduction, the initial phase setting for the stage for the interaction. The context isn't explicitly stated, but it's implied to be a serious discussion. It's possibly a confrontation. And direct questioning. One party directly questions the other, likely about actions or responsibilities. This suggests an attempt to establish accountability. And deflection and avoidance, which is the party is being questioned, tries to evade direct answers, changing the subject or avoiding the core issue. This indicates unwillingness to take responsibility. And persistence and reframing. The questioner persists, perhaps rephrasing their question or changing their approach to get a clear answer. They might try to reframe the issue to highlight the consequences of the other party's action. And the tension and procedural dynamics. The conversation becomes tense possibly due to frustrations and escalating emotion. Procedural dynamics suggest a struggle over how the conversation is conducted, um, who controls the flows, or what rules are followed. And we have the what elements create cohesion, in which we have the repetition of taking responsibility. This phrase is central to the conflict, showing a clear difference in perspectives on accountability. One party demands it, the other resists. And we have the last, non-verbal communication. The pointing and others disrespectful gesture escalate the tension and demonstrate a lack of respect, potentially undermining the possibility of productive dialogue. The structure shows a conversation where one party attempts to hold the other accountable, but face resistance. The resistance is not only verbal, um, but also non-verbal, suggesting a power dynamic where one party feels they can avoid consequences. The repetition of taking responsibility emphasizes the core issue at stake.
Good day, everyone. So, coherence. The discourse remains coherent overall as the questions and responses focus on accountability, but Duterte's evasive answers create occasional disruptions in clarity. So, the discourse partially makes logical sense but is often interrupted and disorganized. So, Senator Risa asked specific and direct questions about accountability for deaths linked to drug war, but Duterte frequently challenges the framing or shifts the discussions, causing a fragmented flow. So the exchange becomes heated with interruptions and overlapping statements, which disrupt the coherence of the conversation. Next is lexical choices. Emotional terms like nagmamakaawa and mistaken identity evoke victimization, while technical terms such as extrajudicial killings and responsibility frame the correlation in legal and political context. So, the text explains how specific language features affect the discussion. Emotional words like nagmamakaawa and mistaken identity create a sense of victimization, making the situation feel personal and emotional. On the other hand, technical terms like extrajudicial killings and responsibility connect the discussion to serious legal and political issues. These word choices help shape how the conversation is understood by emphasizing both emotional and formal aspects.
Let's discuss next the syntax. So for Hintiveros, she uses short declarative sentences to stress accountability. Hontiveros' use of concise and declarative sentences such as directly stating or reiterating Duterte's previous claims, highlighting her intention to demand clear and unambiguous accountability. Declarative sentences present facts or assertions rather than inviting debate, allowing her to frame the discourse in a direct and confrontational manner. By doing so, she maintains focus on the critical issue, which is the consequences of the drug war, without allowing space for evasion. And Duterte uses short, evasive statements mixed with interruptions to deflect questions. Duterte's responses are characterized by brevity and evasiveness, such as the criminal act or guilt is personal, which avoid directly addressing the pointed questions posed by Hontiveros. These short, incomplete answers sidestep accountability and shift the focus from the issue to technical or legal aspects by interrupting Ontiveros, like saying, "Before you rumble on those many things," Duterte disrupts her line of questioning, preventing a seamless flow of discussion and further deflecting attention from the topic. Pimentel uses short procedural sentences to maintain order. So, As the chair of the hearing, Pimentel's role is to regulate the discourse and maintain procedural decorum. His use of brief and formal sentences such as "the hearing is suspended" and it serves to restore control when the interaction escalates. So these procedural statements are neutral and authoritative, focusing on managing the proceedings rather than engaging in the content of the argument. This reinforces his role as a moderator rather than a participant in the conversation between Ontiveros and Duterte. So next slide we have the tone and style. So for the tone and style we have the assertive, critical, defensive, dismissive, neutral, procedural, repetition, irony, imagery, and nonverbal cues. So let's start discussing why we have the assertive. Assertive, it is for the reason that Hontiveros maintains an assertive tone by posing direct and firm questions, such as repeatedly asking Duterte to take responsibility for specific deaths. Critical, we have the critical, as Hontiveros uses a critical tone by highlighting inconsistencies in Duterte's statements and addressing the human cost of the drug war. We also have the defensive. Duterte adopts a defensive tone when he emphasizes guilt is personal, deflecting responsibility onto legal technicalities. We also have the dismissive, as Duterte's interruptions and finger pointing, such as like saying, before you rumble on those many things, it's like a signal, it's like it signal a dismissive attitude aimed at undermining Hontiveros's questions. We also have the neutral for Pimentel, as Pimentel's neutral tone is evident in procedural statements like the hearing is suspended, as he focuses on maintaining order rather than engaging in a discussion of Fonteveros and Duterte. We also have the procedural, as Pimentel uses procedural language to reestablish control over the proceedings, reinforcing his role as the moderator. We also have the repetition. So Ontiveros uses repetition as seen in her repeated references to Duterte's past statements to emphasize accountability and expose contradictions. We also have the irony. There is irony in Duterte's claiming take full responsibility while simultaneously refusing to assume responsibility for specific deaths. So we also have the imagery. Ontiveros evokes imagery through examples like nagmamakaawa pero pinatay to illustrate the brutality and human impact of the drug war. And lastly, we have the nonverbal cues. Duterte's act of pointing his finger at Ontiveros serves as an aggressive, nonverbal cue, signaling an attempt to assert dominance.
So let us now proceed to paralinguistics. So intonation, gestures, and pauses reflect tension. Senator Riz emphasizes accountability with rising intonation, and Duterte points and interrupts, undermining professionalism. So in here, the paralinguistic features of the exchange highlight contrasting approaches. Duterte's firm tone, direct responses, and gestures such as pointing, reflecting his defensiveness, and an attempt to assert control. His brief and emphatic no in response to taking responsibility for Kian de los Santos' death emphasizes his rejection of personal accountability, even as he acknowledged responsibility for broader drug war policies. Additionally, his request for a recess reveals discomfort and a desire to avoid further confrontation. In contrast, Hontiveros maintains a steady and firm tone throughout, using rising intonation to underscore the importance of her questions. Her controlled delivery and persistence effectively redirect the conversation to critical issues of accountability. Next one is the pragmatic features. First, the speech acts. Senator Riza assertives and directive demanding accountability. Duterte defensive and commissive, denying responsibility but acknowledging the policy. So in here, the speech acts in the conversation reveal different intentions. Ontiveros using directive speech acts to demand accountability, repeatedly questioning Duterte about his responsibility for specific incidents like Kian's death, and her approach is assertive and focused on extracting clarity. Duterte, however, adopts a defensive stance through his speech acts. He acknowledges responsibility for the overall drug war policies but denies personal guilt for specific deaths by emphasizing legal definitions of guilt and shifting the focus to legal technicalities. He avoids directly addressing the accusations. His request for Eriza's further reflects an attempt to disengage and deflect from direct confrontation.
So Senator Risa implies that Duterte's stance is hypocritical by pointing out the inconsistency between his past statements and his current refusal to take responsibility for specific death. For instance, she highlights Duterte's public claims that he would take full accountability for the consequences of the drug war, yet he denies responsibility for the killings of individuals like Kian de los Santos and Carl Anthony Nunez. By doing so, she suggests that his actions and words do not align, indirectly questioning his sincerity and accountability. Meanwhile, Duterte's response that guilt is personal implies a separation between his role as policymaker and the actions of those implementing the drug war, effectively distancing himself from its negative outcomes. Politeness strategies. So Senator Risa uses formal address such as Mr. Chair and maintains a respectful tone to uphold professionalism and her credibility as a senator. So this approach helps her challenge Duterte without appearing confrontational. On the other hand, Duterte employs strategies that undermine her authority, such as interrupting her, dismissing her questions as rambling and pointing a finger at her, so which could be seen as an attempt to assert dominance and challenge her face. So despite this, Senator Risa counters by emphasizing the specificity and evidence-based nature of her questions, reasserting her credibility and turning the focus back to the 30's accountability even in a challenging conversational environment.
Power dynamics and ideology. So the power relations is reflects a powerful struggle, Senator Risa dominant as an investigator, holding Duterte accountable. Duterte attempts to assert authority through deflections and interruptions. And the ideologies, Duterte authoritarian, prioritizing law and order over rights. Senator Riza advocates for human rights and democratic accountability. Dominance of resistance or resistance. Dominance, Senator Riza's persistence in questioning Duterte. Resistance, Duterte's interruptions, deflections, and call for a recess.
So the dominance in this exchange is evident in Senator Risa Hontiveros' control over the questioning. Her persistence in pressing Duterte for clear answers, despite his attempts to evade responsibility, highlights her role as the investigator of this discourse. However, resistance is expressed through Duterte's attempts to shift the focus away from moral responsibility and deflect his accountability to legal arguments, such as the personal nature of guilt. So his interruptions and the demand for a recess serve as tactics to regain control of the conversation. Senator Hontiveros responds to his resistance by maintaining her composure and authority, emphasizing the specificity of her questions to keep Duterte accountable. Despite his effort to deflect, she remains focused on the moral and political implications of his actions. The cultural or historical context of this exchange is rooted in the ongoing Philippine War on Drugs, which has sparked significant debate about governance, human rights, and accountability. The killings, often described as extrajudicial, have drawn both domestic and international criticism for their impact on human rights and democratic values. The discussion at hand reflects broader conversations about the implication of state-led violence and the need for leaders to be held accountable for their policies and their consequences. It also ties into larger debates surrounding justice, human rights advocacy, and the ethical responsibilities of government officials in the face of controversial and violent policies. This exchange between Senator Hontiveros and Duterte exemplifies that the tension between a human rights perspective and a law and order approach, which continues to shape political and legal conversations in the Philippines.
And power dynamics between Duterte and Senator Risa are deeply rooted in the events and consequences of Duterte's war on drugs. This war was drawn significant international condemnation due to allegation of widespread human rights abuses. The Philippine Senate's involvement in investigating these alleged abuses and holding the state accountable for them a crucial element of the context. Essentially, the political clash isn't isolated. It, it is directly linked to the shape by a major historical event with a severe human rights implication, and the Senate attempts to address those implications. The discourse analysis revealed how language was used to convey authority, accountability, and power during the Senate hearing on the Philippine drug wars. Senator and witnesses relied on formal speech, technical terms, and structural agreements to support their position and credibility. However, interruption and disagreements highlight tensions in the discussion. This interaction reflected the complexities of addressing sensitive issues such as public safety and governance. All taken together, the analysis showed that discourse in the Senate hearing shaped the way information was presented and interpreted. It demonstrates how language can influence perception of the truth and accountability. The finding emphasized the need for clear and respectful communication in addressing societal issues to promote understanding and effective solution.
And that's it for our discourse analysis, analyzing the exchange between Senator Hontiveros and the former President Rodrigo Roa Duterte regarding on his accountability on war on drugs. And thank you, God bless, and have a nice New Year.